Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today we are in Saumur-Champigny and we're looking at the Domaine de Roches Neuves 2015, Les Mémoires, Saumur-Champigny. Thierry Germain of Domaine de Roches Neuves is among the elite wine growers in Saumur-Champigny. And the cornerstone of his approach is biodynamics and the physical and spiritual relationship between the vines, the earth, the sun, and man. He takes a very meticulous and thoughtful approach in the vineyard and cellar. And when you've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with Thierry, which I had the opportunity to do back in May, you really do get the sense that it's as if he knows and understands intimately each individual vine at the Domaine. He makes several cuvées parcellaires from Cabernet Franc, and through these cuvées, he really seeks to communicate the terroir in the finished wine. I've had a chance to do videos featuring the Franc de Pied, Terre Chaude, and Clos de l'Echilier, and today we are looking at probably the most special cuvée at the Domaine, Les Mémoires. And the parcels for Les Mémoires, along with Clos de l'Echilier, were acquired by Thierry back in 2012. And these two vineyards are just a stone's throw from one another in the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire in Saumur-Champigny. And not only do these two cuvées represent the upper echelon of the Cabernet Francs that Thierry makes, in the glass, in tasting, they offer a bit of a yin and yang experience, even though these vineyards are quite close together, but the terroirs are so different. Now, I have had a chance to talk a little bit about the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire when I did the video on Clos de l'Echilier earlier this year. But there are some complexities to the terroir here, so it is worth revisiting. So the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire is bordered to the west by the commune of Saumur and bordered to the east by the commune of Saumur-Champigny. And the commune starts just at the bank of the Loire River, and it stretches around 3.5 kilometers south, and it's about 2 kilometers wide from east to west. And there's quite a bit of variability in terms of the topography here in this commune. And that means that we find different exposures in terms of the vineyards throughout the commune. And because of the nature of the topography, this has actually exposed different soils across the commune as well. So in the north and northeastern part of the commune, as well as the southwestern corner of the commune where Dampierre-sur-Loire borders wherein, here we find vineyards that are at elevations of around 45 to 60 meters above sea level. And this is where we find the upper Turonian or the middle Turonian tuffeau chalk bedrock. And the topsoils will vary in terms of their texture as well as the depth of the topsoil depending on the vineyard site. And then in the center and the southern part of the commune, we find vineyards that are at a higher elevation, around 65 to 90 meters above sea level. And this is where we find soils that date to the Senonian era and the Eocene epoch. Now, I have not covered in detail these soils that date to these geological periods in history because, quite frankly, I haven't come across the same level of detail on these soils and their properties. And across the appellation, these soils aren't discussed to the same degree that the Turonian tuffeau chalk-derived soils are. But with that said, I am going to try to articulate these soils to the best of my knowledge. So we have soils that date to the Senonian era, which is part of the Cretaceous period in history. And generally speaking, these soils are either sands, sandy clays, or clayey sands, and they will be mixed with either flint stones, either sandstones, or quartz as well. These soils are deeper, and we can find subsoils that are either a sandy clay or gravel, depending on the vineyard and the parcels. And then from the Eocene epoch, we find two broad groups of soils. From the Lutean age, we find pockets of a lacustrine limestone or a freshwater limestone. And this is the same freshwater limestone that we find in the commune of Saumur-Champigny, particularly around the hamlet of Champigny. And these soils are a little bit more shallow, and the subsoil will vary here depending on the vineyard and the parcel. And then from the Bartonian age, we have two kinds of soils. We either have silty sands or clayey sands, and these soils will be either a bit more gray to white in color, or they'll be a bit more red in color. And here we will find either flint or limestone or also sandstone pebbles, depending on the parcel. Again, these soils are deeper, and we generally find either a sandy clay subsoil, or we'll find, again, a gravelly subsoil as well. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, these soils will all have different properties and will impact the vine's ability to access water, drainage, potential for vigor, potential yield, how early or late the site is as it relates to bud break as well as ripening. And this impacts phenolic as well as sugar ripeness in the grapes. And does this really matter necessarily for an inexpensive entry-level Saumur-Champigny from a larger producer? No. But for vignerons like Thierry and others that take the time to create cuvées parcellaires to showcase the diversity of soils across this appellation, this offers an opportunity for discovery for the consumer. And it is my hope and my goal that over the course of time, I'll be able to better understand these soils and what they give to the finished wine, and hopefully be able to communicate that better to wine enthusiasts and wine professionals alike, so that they can have a chance to discover more that this appellation has to offer in terms of wines and diversity of cuvées. Now, looking at the Clos for Les Mémoires, this is coming from a 0.8 hectare parcel of vines, and we're at the northern end of the commune, about 600 meters from the bank of the Loire River. And we're on a relatively high plateau here at about 85 meters above sea level. And this Clos is surrounded almost entirely by forest. And this is important because this has helped to create a unique microclimate here that is slightly warmer, because the forest helps to block out some of the winds that would otherwise come through. And these trees also help to enhance the biodiversity of this vineyard. Now, in terms of soils, as I mentioned, we are in the northern part of the commune, but we're at a higher elevation, and this gives us an indication of what we're looking at from a soil perspective. And these soils are unique. We have these soils that date to the Bartonian age, and in terms of the texture, we have it's like a silty, sandy texture, and then at about 70 centimeters, we have a sandy clay subsoil beneath that. And there's a strong vein of flint that runs through these soils. And the soils are quite stony as well, anywhere from 50 to 100% stones in this vineyard. And we're dealing with any number of sizes in terms of these flint stones. And these stones are important because we have a high percentage of these stones. This impacts the microclimate as well, because the stones will have absorbed some of the heat from the sunshine during the day, and then they'll radiate that back to the vines at night. Now, what also makes this Clos and this vineyard very special is the vines were planted in 1904, which means in 2015, the vines would have been 111 years old. What's more is that because of the depth of the soils and the slightly sandier texture of these soils, in this Clos, there are pockets of vines that are actually ungrafted. I wasn't able to locate any information on who planted this vineyard in 1904, but before Thierry acquired this in 2012, this Clos was well cared for by another vigneron, and the fruit at the time was being sold to the local cooperative. Now, it is believed that these vines are some of the oldest vines of any variety in anywhere in the Loire Valley. Now, Thierry is doing a concerted effort here to preserve the heritage of these ancient vines. So Thierry takes cuttings from the best plants at Les Mémoires and a few other vineyard sites, and he plants new vines by Massal selection in his vine conservatory, or his conservatoire du Cabernet, as he refers to it. And when he needs to replace vines in any vineyard or establish a new vineyard, Thierry will take cuttings from his vine conservatory and plant new vines via massal selection. So he is, in a sense, continuing the legacy of these old vines throughout his entire domain. Now, from a winemaking perspective, all the fruit for this wine was hand harvested and it was destemmed, and the fermentation takes place in concrete with indigenous yeast. And the maceration here is through infusion. And Thierry will do he will go in and wet the cap gently as he needs to during the fermentation in order to ensure that there's a healthy environment for the yeast to thrive. And the total time on skins is around 15 to 18 days or so. And then in terms of the aging for this wine, Thierry is very selective about how he goes about his aging process and the vessel he chooses for aging, because he wants to match the vessel to the soil and to the energy of the site. So he will opt for round vessels or larger round vessels for vineyards that have a bit more of a clay impact or deeper soils. And then he'll opt for more of an oval vessel where the vineyard has a slightly more shallower topsoil where there might be a greater impact of the Turonian tuffeau chalk. So in the case of this wine, this was aged in larger round foudre for about 12 months before bottling. So let's look at this wine. So the nose is really fragrant and quite open, and it's very perfumed, and the fruits come through for me as a bit more dark fruited, which is very much in keeping with previous experiences I've had with this cuvée. So I'm getting a little bit of black currant here, there's a touch of black raspberry, there's a little bit of a wild blueberry note, and the fruits lean a little bit more in that sweet tart savory spectrum. And they are still quite fresh, which is really wonderful. But you do sense that there is some bottle age here and a bit of evolution in terms of the fruit profile. And then in terms of the pyrazines, I love how they're coming through right now. There's a bit of cedar here, a bit of like wet autumn leaves. There's some dried thyme. And then the florals are really lovely on this wine. I'm getting like a mix of wild flowers, like Queen Anne's lace, and then there's like a bit of purple and pink flowers as well. But really the nose is very open, very fragrant, very expressive as well. In terms of the fruit profile on the palate, the same fruits come through really nicely. And then we are getting into some tertiary layers here. So the fruits, as I said, are kind of starting to evolve a bit, and we're getting these layers of leather. There's a bit of like a mossy note. There is a little bit of potting soil. There's a touch of milk chocolate here, a bit of green coffee bean. There's so much going on in this wine. There's a lovely spice element as well. It's quite delicate, a bit of cardamom, a touch of white pepper as well. The acidity is really, really vibrant, very refreshing, very much in balance with the weight and the fruit profile and the tannin as well. And speaking of the tannin, these tannins are gorgeous. They're very silky in the mouth, super, super fine, and they've just got this wonderful texture on the finish that is just, it's like the most finely woven of fabrics. It's quite lovely. The overall profile of this wine is a bit more round and broad on the palate, which again is in keeping with previous examples and previous vintages of this cuvée that I've had. And that makes sense because we're dealing with some deeper soils here that have a bit more clay impact as well, less impact of the tuffeau. So it does sit a bit more broadly on the palate as opposed to vertical. This wine is so harmonious and so balanced, and there is something about it that is rather steadfast or resolute in nature, and it's really a profound cuvée, and it's kind of the sort of thing that you just want to sit and ponder over for a long period of time, because it's just constantly evolving as I'm tasting it, and it really does kind of hit at an emotional level. And this is really an emotional wine for me. This is the first cuvée from Domaine de Roches Neuves that I discovered when I was living in Miami. And I also had a chance to visit these vineyard parcels when I was in the Loire back in May, and I gotta say, it's a pretty profound experience to stand in front of a vine that's nearly 120 years old, and to think how the world has changed over the last 120 years, and how many times that vineyard could have been ripped up and replaced with younger vines, and yet it's still there. It's still standing, and there is a preserved legacy here. And it's encouraging to know that through all these years, through all this time, the vineyard is still there, and there has still been a desire to keep these vines alive and to keep that history, that piece of the Saumur-Champigny appellation. And it's just so wonderful to know that Thierry is now the custodian of these ancient vines and is really seeking to preserve the legacy of this very, very special vineyard. And it really is one of probably the most special vineyard in Saumur-Champigny, and also perhaps even the Loire Valley, if nothing else from the standpoint of how old these vines are. And if you have had a chance to taste the Les Mémoires, do let me know what you thought of this wine in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.